Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of Hayward Field in Eugene, Oregon, looking out at the crowd as you get ready to fulfill one of your greatest goals and dreams, competing for a spot on Team USA at the Olympic Track and Field Trials. Oh, and you're also going to fling yourself almost 2 stories in the air using a thin pole. Our guest on today's episode has done all of those things. Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Blue Water Running Podcast. I'm your host, Maren, and this podcast features and celebrates the accomplishments of high school and collegiate cross-country and track and field athletes from the Blue Water area of Michigan. We will be talking with Kenzie Shell Beukes, a 2015 Port Huron Northern grad who recently vaulted in the 2024 Olympic Track and Field Trials. Kenzie is an incredibly accomplished athlete. She was undefeated in pole vault during the regular season her entire senior year as a Husky, including winning the Division I state meet with a vault of 13.3. That made her a back-to-back MHSAA champion, as she also won the state meet, indoor and outdoor, her junior year and was third as a sophomore. She set a state record in pole vault for indoor at 13.6 and outdoor at 13.9 and was a USATF Junior Olympics All-American. Kenzie went on to have a very successful collegiate career at the University of Oklahoma, becoming an NCAA All-American as a freshman, winning various invitationals and setting meet records, and graduating in 2019 as the school record holder in pole vault, at that time at 14.5.5. A little background on pole vaulting. According to historians, people have been vaulting since the ancient Greeks for non-competitive purposes, such as jumping over walls, think castle invasion during battle, obstacles, or even to get from place to place across very marshy and wet areas. In some parts of Europe, they even kept stacks of jumping poles at every house to cross canals without getting wet, or to avoid long journeys to find a bridge. Pole vaulting is now a competitive sport for height instead of distance, and has been an Olympic event for men since 1896. An American man won every pole vault gold medal from 1896 until 1968. The women's pole vault has only been in the Olympics since 2000. The technology of poles has changed quite a bit as well, starting with ash or hickory wood, bamboo, aluminum, and steel, and then on to modern fiberglass or carbon fiber. Pole vault is always named by many Blue Water area athletes and podcast guests as either their favorite field event to watch or one they've always wanted to try. So it's going to be a great conversation with such an accomplished vaulter. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the Blue Water Running Podcast. I'm excited you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, I've been wanting to have a pole vaulter on for a while. Because a lot of kids say that that's their favorite event in track and field, and they've always wanted to try it. So we went big with our first guest because you're an Olympic trials athlete, which is a really big deal. So thanks to Greg Whitkin of Elite Feet for passing on your number.
Yeah, and thanks again for having me. Yeah, pole vaulting is definitely an entertaining event. A lot can happen. So yeah, I'm excited to be the first pole vaulter on your podcast.
Well, thanks for joining me. So we have to start with your amazing pole vaulting achievement. So you made it to the Olympic trials. That is just a dream come true for me to even spectate something like that. I cannot imagine being an athlete and competing there. So tell us about what that experience was like for you and some of the highlights of your trip to Eugene.
Yeah, it was really an amazing experience for me. And I had not known that I qualified until basically the very last day that I could enter the competition. And so I changed my entire workout schedule that I had planned for. I go in 4-week sections for each workout group that I do. And so I moved it up a little bit so that I could potentially jump high enough to qualify for the trials at the very beginning of the season, like in January. And it was going really well, but every weekend I kept falling short. So I travel everywhere I could think of, everywhere that had a meet and would let me in. I was traveling, and every time I just kept falling short, pick myself back up and go again. And so at the very end there, one of my buddies reached out to me and said, "Hey, why haven't you entered?" And I go, "Wait, what do you mean?" I don't know why I didn't check the entry list, but I was qualified since July of last year at Grand Haven Beach Vault. My 14.6 mark got me in. And so I hurried up and entered, booked tickets, booked hotels, told my parents they were coming out. And my husband came out too. So it was really just a shock for all of us, I guess. And just being able to go and compete against some of the very best athletes in the world and just being in that environment. And being in Hayward Field, I was in Hayward Field back in high school, but that's the last time I was there. And that was the older stadium. And so I was really excited to get back to it and see the new stadium, have that really neat environment. And I've been wanting to qualify for the trials since 2016. I barely missed qualification then. So I've really been chasing this goal for a while. So it was an absolute dream come true and such a fun experience that I wish everybody could experience at least one time in their life. But yeah, it was really amazing.
So, what is next for you? What are your next steps after this?
So it's kind of exciting. I have been living in Jonesboro, Arkansas for 4 or 5 years now, with my sister and met my husband here, and we live here now, but we're actually planning on moving, and we haven't officially announced anything yet. So I'm not going to say anything yet, but we're moving, and I'm going to keep taking it year by year and jumping and potentially go into a new environment next year, new situation. So we're all really excited about that. And so definitely keep an eye out for that. I'll probably announce something on Instagram whenever I officially decide on where we're going.
Okay, exciting.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back a bit to your introduction to the sport. So, how old were you when you first began pole vaulting, and how did you first start out trying this event?
So it's kind of the typical pole vaulter story that you hear all the time. I was a gymnast for 10 years, and I actually did gymnastics at All-American Flames Gymnastics, which is in Port Huron. But I did that for 10 years and was already doing track, but I was doing the short sprints. And so when I got into high school, the regular outdoor spring season, I was 15, and my parents kind of talked me into trying since I had that good background. So I showed up and said I wanted to do pole vaulting, and it just kind of took off from there. And I stopped doing like all the sprints. I stopped doing gymnastics just because I really fell in love with the sport and it was going really well for me and I could see myself going far with it. So really dedicated a lot of my life to the sport at that point from that earlier age of when I started.
What do you believe might be some of the biggest factors that are necessary for success in the pole vault?
So I would say there's a lot of different things. A lot of people say that sprinting is really important, which I believe is really important. Strength is important. But I think it's just this never give up attitude because, and this goes with so many sports too, of like, you just got to keep going after it, even when things aren't going well. And just trying everything that you can to like be better. Like when I was in high school, I would do things that kind of set me apart. Like I wanted to lift more and I wanted to stay outside on the track and do like little drills. But just being able to go that little bit of extra mile will take you so many places that you could only dream of.
Besides vaulting itself, what other specific training exercises or prep do athletes in this event usually do to prepare? So, for example, are there specific routines or exercises you really focus on? Is there anything that a vaulter would do that no one else would?
Yeah, I think a lot of people do different things, but for the most part, it's being as fast and powerful as you can. Strength comes naturally for me, so I've kind of had to lay off the heavy weights, but change my weight room in a way that it was more explosive. So I put on less weight and moved it more efficiently. And I do a lot of sprint exercises. But something that makes us a little bit different is like we'll still do some gymnastics stuff. It's really good for body awareness, especially if the pole vaulter hasn't done gymnastics before in their life. It really develops that body awareness that can help them maneuver around the pole and make it do more things in their favor. So that's probably more of the odd thing that we do.
Well, as someone who is not a fan of heights, I cannot imagine flinging myself into the air. So I'm
Yeah.
always impressed.
Well, what's funny is the older I get, the more I realize I am kind of scared of heights too. But
Oh,
when you're actually doing the sport, it's kind of a blur when you're up in the air and you're focused on other things. So you forget about that almost. But yeah, the older I get, the more I realize that like fear is a thing, especially when it comes to heights. So kind of like a funny thing.
Yeah, I'm assuming, I don't know from experience, you do, but I'm assuming you're thinking about your performance and then just going so fast that you don't really have time to be afraid. Is that how it works?
Yeah, like there, I think most of the fear comes before you actually take off. And I guess that's with life too, is like fear doesn't really happen while you're doing the thing you're scared of. It's before you do it.
Right.
Um, and so when you're actually like jumping, you have like one or two cues you think about, and then you'll hear this from a lot of pole vaulters too, is when you're actually like getting upside down and going over the bar, most of the time your mind is just like blank and you can't remember. It's like almost like a blackout, but you're not blacking out. It's kind of hard to explain.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just like, oh, I did it and it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, is there specific gear that you need for pole vault? Obviously, you need a pole. But for example, long jumpers wear different shoes than a sprinter for their event. So I was curious if you had anything specific that you use.
Yeah, and the older I get too, I realize that I carry more things with me. But one of the key things is spikes. You'll see specific pole vault spikes, which I use Nike pole vaulting spikes, but you'll also see a lot of pole vaulters use triple jump spikes, whether it be Adidas or Nike. Those are the two main spikes that we stick with. Outside of that, I'll carry random things like a towel or some extra tape or chalk. Chalk's really important for me, but some people use this black sticky spray on their top hand so they're able to stick onto to the pole more. But that's more of just preference and what you like. I haven't actually tried that one, but it is an interesting way to go about things.
Hmm. Interesting. I've
Yeah.
seen gymnasts, I guess, is it chalk they use to get a grip? Is it kind of similar to that?
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Okay.
And since I use that most of my life, I just switched over to chalk when I'm jumping too, and it gives me just the right amount of grip that I need for jumping.
So, this next question came from a student athlete, and they wanted to know how you mentally prepare for a meet that could come with a lot of high stakes pressure, like the Olympic trials.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I feel like as I gain more experience in pole vaulting, I become more excited about the pressure that comes rather than freaking out. In high school, when I started getting a lot better, and even in college, when these big events would come, I would freak out a little bit and actually choke at a lot of the bigger competitions, which is pretty devastating when like your sport is basically your life at that point. But over time, you kind of realize like it's not the end of the world. And going into these events is something that can be really exciting. You get this opportunity, you've earned a spot to be there. And so I think it's a matter of seeing it through a different lens of like, oh, this is fun and I want to be here. And one of the things that helps calm me down is actually praying and kind of grounding myself and God in those moments, and kind of giving it all to Him rather than thinking like the world is weighing on my shoulders, which can be pretty stressful. But yeah, that's basically what I stick to is just trying to stay as grounded and positive as I can throughout the entire competition, not just before. It's a matter of like staying on top of your game at every second because fear comes in pretty quickly and doubt, and it's hard to get away from it once it starts to take over. But yeah, I would say just trying to stay as positive as you can in every single moment.
I love that. I've talked a lot to my own kids and some athletes that I've chatted with about how fear robs you of the joy of the moment.
Yeah.
And I read the book by Sydney McLaughlin Lavroni, and she talked about how her first Olympic trials, she did not enjoy all the success that had brought her there and the chance to be, at this moment where all her dreams were being realized. And it just robbed her of all of that. And I thought that's a great perspective because that's why you train. Like it should be fun. You should be excited. Being nervous is human and normal and not bad. But if that overwhelms everything else, then that's when it really steals that from you.
Yeah, that's exactly it too. And I haven't read that book. I'll definitely have to read it. She's one of my favorites. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll
She's
yeah, I'll
got
go
a good
out and read it.
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm excited to see what she does in a couple weeks too.
Oh, me too. Yeah, she's one of my favorites, like I said. So it's going to be really exciting to see her and a bunch of the other athletes get after it too.
Yep. So we're going to backtrack a little bit and look to your college days. You mentioned competing in college. So what was the deciding factor when you chose Oklahoma for your collegiate career?
So it's actually like you always hear this cliche that like when you're touring all these different schools, you'll know which is the right one. And I took 7 visits because I had no idea where I wanted to go. And so Oklahoma was my very last visit, and I actually tried canceling the visit before I went on because I thought I was going to go to Indiana University. So I called up the coach and told him what my plan was, and the Oklahoma coach goes, like, basically, like, you should come. We already have everything planned. Like, just give us a shot. And I felt so bad. And so I like basically obligated myself into going. And he came up for an at-home visit. And that actually went really well. And so I went down to Oklahoma and visited as well. And him and I got along really well. The campus is absolutely beautiful. The scholarship fell in line. The people seemed like my kind of people too, just like very down to earth, wanting to work hard, focused, and it just felt right. And so after saying no and all these visits, I decided to go to Oklahoma just because it just felt like I was meant to be there at the end of the day.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, how did collegiate pole vaulting differ from your high school pole vaulting experience?
I would say there were both a lot of similarities and differences. In high school, I had some really amazing teammates, and I'm super thankful for that. And an amazing coach too, Craig Dickinson. And then I went on to college, and it was kind of like a step up from with like the level of competition that you have. So in high school, there were some competitions where I would get to jump with the guys, which was kind of fun, just because like it's not very fun when you're at this competition and then all the athletes like end and then it's your time to start, and so you like start after everybody. Like
Right.
it's fine and it still happens, but it's more fun when you have people that you're jumping with. And so being in college, I got more of that experience, and then like having more girls around me to jump with was really fun, and having a lot more resources too, just like with the personal trainers, and like I had access to psychologists and just a lot of people around me, which was really fun. And again, like high school was amazing, but college was more of a step up. And being at Oklahoma too was really neat because it seemed like all the other sports, they were national champions. So being a part of that was really like honorable too. Like you want to be up there with them. So it was a pretty special experience and I still miss it. I wish I could go back and relive it, but I'm glad to have been able to experience it when I did.
And where in Oklahoma is that Stillwater?
So we're in Norman. Stillwater
Okay,
is
okay.
Oklahoma State. Yeah.
Okay, that's what it is. All right, my husband's family lives in Bartlesville, and
Okay.
so I
Yeah.
knew my niece was in Stillwater, but I didn't know which was which. So
Yeah, it's funny though because my mom is from Broken Arrow, which is
okay,
near
yep,
Tulsa, and she went to Oklahoma State, so we're kind of rivals. But she was super supportive
okay,
with my decision too.
yeah. Well, my niece has great things to say about where she went, and then we visited Oklahoma many times as a state, and there's so many interesting things about it, and there's a lot of stereotypes about the state that are not true. Like I always thought, oh, it's flat as a pancake and it's a prairie. There's actually quite a few spots that aren't.
Yeah,
And it is hot. That's true. But we found some really cool things there that I never would have known about had my family not lived there and been familiar with it. So,
yeah, exactly. And especially with the college town too, it brings a different kind of vibe to it. So it's not all like country land and
right.
weeds growing around, there's
Yes,
a lot more to
tumbleweeds.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Although I have to say, one of my husband and I's favorite memories that we always laugh about is in the spring, a lot of the cattle ranchers burn their pasture, and there's signs on the highway that say don't drive into smoke or don't cross if the highway is on fire.
Oh my, if the
And
highway is on fire?
yeah, don't drive across it. And my sister-in-law, somebody that she knew there had said, "There's nothing I love more than the smell of burning pasture in the spring."
Oh, yeah, I
And
know
we just
that's
thought,
so
"Oh,
bad.
that's funny."
Yeah, yeah, that's bad. Yeah, my husband actually was a farmer for a little bit there. So I know some farm
Okay.
facts, but I didn't
Yeah.
know the highway burns.
Yeah, well,
I'm
if
sure
it
it's not exactly like that, but
no, I don't think they planned it. I think it just kind of jumped across when they were burning their pasture. Things,
yeah,
but every year it's
goodness.
like, oh, such and such burned down because the pasture burn got out of control. And we're like, well, you know.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, what has been your favorite experience or meet so far? If you could pick one in your vaulting career, you have a favorite or something that just really stands out.
Picking one is very difficult. But I would say more recently, it would have been Grand Haven Beach Vault. It was last year in July, which is the meet that qualified me for the trials, but I don't think it was my last, it actually was my last meet of the season. But it was a season where I was finding my joy again, and just having that at that competition was really amazing, and having my confidence too, because I was able to go back to my hometown, jump really well in front of people who haven't seen me jump in a really long time. So it was a pretty special moment in my career. Um, of course, there have been really amazing moments, but that's the one that stands out more than the others right now.
Yeah, that's cool. I saw photographs of that. One of my son's college teammates actually takes photographs for that, and he had posted them on Instagram, and it was so cool. I thought, what an
Oh,
amazing
really?
idea to vault on a beach.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, the weather is kind of unpredictable. I think the last few years it's been great, but it's so much fun. And a lot of people come out and watch and cheer you on, which I'm sure you're familiar with. You don't get all the time. And so
Right?
having that is really enjoyable and just makes it so much better to be in front of a crowd like that.
Yeah, sure. Well, on the flip side of that, what has been one of the most challenging parts of pole vaulting for you?
I would say the more challenging part for me is the mental side of it. And I think it's something that has to be trained just as much as the physical side at this point in my career. But it's a little bit harder to navigate because there's no like set schedule on your practice sheet each day on like how to tackle it. So for me, I'm still learning and there's a lot to it and I still struggle with it at times, but just like really being grounded in my faith and then like also like I said earlier trying to talk myself up even when I'm not jumping, even in workouts, seeing positive lights and like telling myself like I am good at what I'm doing and like how to become better, like finding confidence in each little thing that I'm doing, I think helps in the long run of becoming a better athlete physically and mentally.
Well, if I could tell athletes one thing, it would be tell yourself that you are good at what you do and repeat that, and then you believe it. So,
Yeah,
so many of
it's a
them
lot of
doubt
that.
themselves. Yeah, it's a mantra that you can repeat and believe in yourself. And that doesn't mean everything's always going to be perfect and you won't have struggles or challenges, but at least you're your biggest fan, right?
Yeah, and that's how it should be. Like, it's not going to go perfect every time. So you got to
Right.
be able to pick yourself back up, even when you don't believe in yourself. Like, you just got to keep on digging yourself out and picking yourself up, and then eventually you'll get there.
Exactly. Well, let's go on to some technical questions, so to say. How do you transport and travel with a pole? So I've always wondered about this, especially for like an international flight. So how does that all work if you're flying to a meet and you have to bring your pole?
So it is extremely challenging, as you can probably imagine. And the airlines aren't the easiest to work with sometimes. So, like, if you're driving, I just throw my poles on top of my roof rack and use ratchet straps to hook them down. And if you can drive places, you'll drive. But if you have to fly, like say I live in Arkansas now and I went to Oregon for the trials, I have to fly. And so I drive to the airport and I go to the desk, and only Southwest takes poles. You can't fly any other airline, only Southwest.
Really?
Yeah. And
Okay.
so you drop your poles off, say, I'll be right back. Gotta go park my car. And they're like, okay. And I come back, and then you have to pay $75 each way to transport your poles under the plane with you. And I put an Apple AirTag in mine too, because
Mm.
more oftentimes than you should hear about is how often people's poles get lost or broken. And so
Oh,
it's kind of a scary thing because like I bought my own poles and they're not cheap. So they're like precious to me. And I'm so nervous about them like breaking or getting lost, which they've gotten delayed one time, but for the most part, it's been pretty good. But you really just pray that they make it to the destination. And so you can jump on your own poles. And then you fly back with them. But international flights, I'm not 100% sure how the other athletes do it,
hmm.
but I flew with United one time to Mexico and they just like outlawed poles being on
Oh,
their planes. And so I had to leave my poles behind and use the poles that they had in stock. So you'll see that a lot of times, but like for athletes going to Paris, there are a
mhm.
few airlines that take poles. So I think they just navigate through that, which can be a little bit challenging because it's that. Plus, you have to get a car with roof racks. Plus, you have
Right.
to find a hotel that will put your poles inside the hotel because you probably don't want to leave your poles outside in the street in a foreign country. And so it's a little bit challenging, but you'll also hear some great stories of amazing athletes in the past and their experience with it. It's like a whole thing on its own. It's challenging,
Yeah,
but it's worth it.
I cannot even imagine.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I bet. Well, we had an athlete who was a shot putter in college, and so she had to take her shot put on the plane for nationals. And while we were taxiing, it broke loose and it was rolling back and forth. And they thought it was a mechanical error or a problem with the plane. So they stopped and they were checking and they're like, oh no, we just had this metal ball break loose.
Oh my. Yeah, I'm
So
surprised they weren't like, it's a bomb or something
yeah,
awful
no,
like
this
that.
this was pre 9/11.
Okay.
So yeah, there wasn't even security. Like you just walked up to the door of the plane and my dad actually met me there. It was a totally different way to fly then, obviously,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely a lot different than now. Now they'd
Yes.
probably like
Oh yeah, no.
take it and take you too. I don't know.
Yeah, what are you doing with this? Um,
Yeah.
so have you ever had one of your poles break, whether in competition or otherwise?
Yes, I actually have one time. Thankfully, it was only one time. But I was in high school at a competition, and at the time there was a series of poles that weren't made very well, and I think I got one of them.
Oh no.
And like every weekend, you would see someone break one of these poles. And so I ended up breaking the same pole, and I was okay. It kind of shook me mentally, but physically, I was pretty fine. A lot of the force went into my hands, though. So I have like this tendon in my hand that's kind of tight at times, but for the most part, it's fine. But you'll hear sometimes like people breaking their hands
Oh,
whenever they break a pole because it's just so much force that releases into your hands,
right.
or like they might get hit with like a shard and like it cuts through their arm or something. So it can go pretty bad, but
Ooh, yikes.
I've been good for the most part.
Well, I saw a video of pole vault and it must have been, I don't know, maybe 100 years old. I don't know. But they were vaulting over and they didn't have mats. They just landed on their feet on the other side.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they did that and they had like straw pits
Yeah, yeah,
before, like even before the poles would bend too. It's kind
yeah,
of crazy like how much it's transformed over the years.
right.
Like it's still a pretty new sport too, especially on the women's side. But yeah, like you'll meet older men today who say they jumped like that. And so it really wasn't that long ago. It was like
Oh,
that.
that's crazy to me to just,
Yeah.
oh, just go over and land on your feet.
I know, what
Um,
a great idea.
yeah. Oh, well, out of curiosity, if you don't mind sharing with us, what is the average cost of a pool? I have no idea how much one would cost.
Yes. So they recently went up. I got most of mine for cheaper, but retail, they range from length. And so the ones that I'm on, a good deal would probably be like $800 or $900 a pole. And again, I
Ooh.
got mine for a little bit cheaper, thankfully. But yeah, I have, I think, 7 or 8 poles in my bag. So it adds up really quickly. And they do have options where you can rent them from people, but like as you get older too, like you want your own series and it just makes more sense financially to buy your own for the long run.
Right. So do they have a lifespan on them? Can they wear out and you just have to buy a new one?
Not necessarily. Like you'll get some really old poles that you probably want to replace, like if they get dings every now and then. But the place I've been training at for a while put a huge emphasis on not leaving your poles on the ground because a lot of times when they break, it's actually when people are walking over them and accidentally spike them. All it takes is
Mm,
like one nick and then it's done.
okay.
So I usually just really put them away and make sure no one's walking over them to make sure mine are safe. But yeah, you'll see it, especially with the older ones, you'll see a lot of like dents and dings and all of that stuff that you got to watch out for.
So high school athletes, if you're listening, don't step on someone's pole.
Yeah, please don't. It's like
You've been
gold.
warned. Yeah.
Yes, don't do it.
All right. Well, what advice would you give somebody who wants to try pole vault for the very first time? So we've had, like I said, a lot of athletes mention that if they could try one field event that they've never done, or they've always wanted to try something that they admire, it's pole vault. So lay it out. What would you tell them?
Yes, I think pole vaulting can kind of look intimidating and you feel pretty ridiculous when you first start. But I think it's a matter of putting that to the side and you'll see a lot of the pole vaulters have a lot of fun and you want to be part of that group. So I think putting a little bit of your ego to the side and just going out there, putting yourself out and just trying to learn it is the best way to go about it.
I saw a really cool progression video of Mondo Duplantis. It was like starting from when he was a little kid and all his vaulting videos each year. And to see, you don't start out, vaulting world records, right? It's like,
Yeah,
6 feet,
exactly.
5 feet. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it is neat. A lot of people think like, oh, they would fall backwards or like they're too big or something, but it's like, no, like we'll start you at a reasonable grip height, a reasonable step, like it's going to be okay. And so I think it's really just an intimidation game that you got to get over. And then you realize that it's one of the more fun sports in track and field.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. So definitely would be fun to try. I will not be
Yeah.
trying it, but anyone else who would like
Hey,
to, go for it.
anytime, just let me
Oh,
know.
oh boy, that would be an entertaining thing to see. Okay, so let's ask you about some of your favorites. If you are watching a track and field meet, what would be your favorite track event?
Track event, I would
Yeah.
probably say something more like the 4 800. It's long enough to like have some strategy to it, but short enough to keep my shorter attention span. But it's actually pretty fun to watch because people will make moves and then it's like I don't know very much about it honestly. And so it's fun to see like people come through at the end who weren't leading the whole time.
So, what's your favorite field event besides pole vault?
Field event would probably actually be one of the throwing events, maybe javelin, just because it's so clear to see like how far it goes versus like how short it can go too. Like it's so easy for like things to switch up on the athletes. So it's clear to see like how far something goes and basically like how good someone is versus like if someone's struggling. It's entertaining.
I'm always terrified that I'm going to watch one of those officials get shish kebabbed because I feel
Yeah,
like they stand really close and then
they do.
they don't really seem to flinch when these pointed things come flying at them. So gives me a little bit of the
Yeah.
heebie-jeebies.
I know, and we've heard stories too, and like it comes close to the pole vault sometimes too. So I
Oh
think they
yeah.
try to like schedule it differently. But yeah, a lot of those officials are pretty brave out there. with like catching where it lands.
Yeah, I didn't think about that being on the infield while that's going on too. So,
Yeah.
all right. Do you have a favorite athlete in any sport?
Favorite athlete would actually probably be Sydney McLaughlin. I really love her faith and how bold she is with it. And then she's just an incredible athlete too, very humble, like I said before. So I would say she's one of my favorites. And also, I really like Nina Kennedy. She's an Australian pole vaulter. I've never met her, but I've seen a lot of videos and she has a lot of like good energy to her. She's someone who really hypes herself up and puts her emotions on her sleeve and is a fierce competitor. So she's a really fun one to watch too.
All right, your favorite go-to snack for a competition.
That's a good one too. So I have recently been doing grapes just because it gets hot out there and it's not too heavy where I can have like a couple grapes in between each jump and I feel more energized before I go again. So I think that's a good snack basically for anyone who's looking for something a little bit lighter but effective.
Have you ever had frozen grapes?
I have, but I don't like them as much as the fresh ones. Do you?
I like them frozen better. Oh, I love those.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that'd probably be good on competition day too. They're extra cold.
Yes. They're like a little popsicle without sugar. I mean, it's a natural
Yeah.
one. So,
Yeah, exactly.
all right. So, what are some of your favorite free time or hobby activities when you are not training or working? What do you like to do for you?
So, one of the things I really love to do is traveling for fun, specifically like outside of the country. Whenever I get time to do that, like my husband and I are wanting to go to Switzerland, for example, or like I've always wanted to go to Costa Rica. Somewhere new where it's like a culture I haven't quite experienced before is really intriguing to me. So that's kind of like a bigger hobby, but
Mhm.
it's one of my favorite things to do.
I have been to Costa Rica, and the people there are extremely friendly. And they love when you try to speak Spanish. They're very patient because my Spanish
Okay.
is basic at best. But yeah, very friendly, very kind people. So I recommend, and beautiful country, of course. So
Yeah, I've heard really great things. And I took some Spanish classes in college. Not super fluent either, but I think it would be a great place to really challenge my language skills in that and see if I could become any better. But I hear like I've never gone surfing, but I hear it's like really great to
yes,
surf there too.
yes, it's a big surfing country. And then obviously the rainforests are great to visit. Um, we actually went to the beach one day and monkeys came down from the trees and took stuff off our towels. And they had told us you have to hide your things because the monkeys will steal them.
Oh my goodness, like your wallet and your
Yeah,
phone and
like
stuff?
keys, sunglasses, sunblock. Yeah, they'll just come down and take it. So,
Wow,
be
little
careful.
thieves.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, one last question to wrap up our conversation, and that is if you could meet any athlete, they could be from the past or present, living or not, who would you choose?
I'd probably stick with Sydney McLaughlin or also Kobe Bryant. I watched a documentary on the USA basketball team and he was in it and his work ethic is just next level. Like when other people want to go out and have fun and go out to drink and all of that stuff, he didn't care about that stuff. He just wanted to get to work and focus on his goals. And I thought that was really admirable. So I think it would have been neat to meet him. So I would say him or Sydney.
Great choices. I like both
Thank
of
you.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it has been awesome to hear your story, Kenzie. You've got an amazing future ahead of you still, it sounds like. Lots to
Yes, thank
do.
you. I'm
Yeah.
excited. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on how things go and seeing what happens next for you. But thank you again for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great chatting with you.
I'll leave you with this quote by Stacy Dragila, the first woman to win Olympic pole vault gold when the event debuted in the 2000 Sydney Olympics with a vault of 15 feet 1 inch. The world record is now currently 16 feet 7 inches. I think women have brought a lot of life back to the sport. First, because a lot of people doubted women could actually do it well. Two, Part of it is that old fascination some people have in watching athletes risk injury to win. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into today's Blue Water Running podcast. I can't wait to feature more cross-country and track and field athletes from the Blue Water area, so stay tuned because it just might be you. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please share, subscribe, and leave a review. You can find the Blue Water Running podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and other major media players. You can also ask your smart speaker to play the Blue Water Running podcast. If you have an idea for a great topic or guest that you'd like to hear about, feel free to contact me through the website links or show notes. You can follow Blue Water Running on Instagram, X, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also find meet and athlete reports and articles at www.bluewaterrunning.org.